Hello, everybody. The Army of Light Earth Division. It's Shawna L. Francis. Today is September 18th, 2024. Thanks, everybody, for being here for another episode of Decoding the Living Word. We are working with Melchizedek. I'm a conscious channel of Melchizedek, and they had a lot to do with a bunch of the content in the Bible, and they are taking this opportunity to work through me with all of you to help seed consciousness with some of the finer points that were meant to be made in the Bible that have been misconstrued or misinterpreted or mistranslated or deleted altogether. Obviously, the Bible, it's a controversial book, and there's a lot there that is disputed in terms of what the meanings are, and were things real, were they not, were they parables, how literal should we take these passages. So there's a lot here, and it's early in the morning. I have been at this with Melchizedek for hours today, and I honestly have just been questioning whether or not I am up to this task with them. You know, we had tried to get to this earlier in the week because the last few weeks have been like this, where it's midnight by the time I'm creating this content, and it's just too late and I'm just too tired. So I'm there right now, and I'm feeling a bit frustrated and flustered, to be quite honest with all of you, with this process. So I'm hoping that starting next week, we can get a better handle on this and take more time to focus on the content. I mean, Exodus, we're talking about Exodus today. There's so much in Exodus. It's a huge body of work. And again, I think with Melchizedek, this is near and dear to their hearts in terms of this information, and they're being very careful with the wording. There's been other times where I've channeled them or channeled Queen Elizabeth, where it takes some time for them to formulate what they want to say and how they want to say it. And I think they also reach back in context to the era when this particular book was written as part of the Bible. And I think they also think through, what are the questions going to be? How should we present this? I think they're actually trying to decide the best way to present this stuff, sometimes in real time, which to me is a little bit frustrating. It's not a whole lot of channeling today, but it took a good 3 hours for us to get through what I'm going to be talking about with all of you, what Melchizedek had to say in terms of Exodus. And we just kind of scratched the surface with it, to be honest. We're going to talk mostly about the 10 Commandments, but again, not much there, but it's just more general context. So thanks for your patience and for hanging out with us here. We're talking about the Bible. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but again, the work we're doing here is really important. We're seeding consciousness with this information before it is kind of spread out to a wider audience. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get into this here. All right, so for those of you who are unfamiliar with Exodus, or it's been a while since you read any of that or were exposed to any of these stories, Genesis goes into Exodus. The 12 tribes of Israel start to flourish. They're doing really, really well. Egypt decides to take them in really as slaves and make them work on their behalf. So you've got the Israelites with this God. You've got Egypt with their gods. And it's just this clash here. And Exodus is the Exodus out of Egypt with the help of Moses and God, bringing everybody out of Egypt, out of slavery. The other big parts of Exodus, the 10 Commandments coming from Mount Sinai, with Moses getting this information directly from God. There is this idea of this tabernacle where it's like a dwelling place that was built supposedly by the Israelites, so that God could commune with the people kind of at their level. But, it was just like this big golden place. Everything had gold. Everything was wrapped in gold. We didn't get to that today, and I'm actually hoping we can talk a little bit about this. But Melchizedek does say today that a lot of this content in Exodus was not written by them or, channeled by God, but in fact written by church deacons, scribes, and others who were translating the information and, not, really kind of misrepresented as being from on high when really it wasn't. There's this golden calf incident where, Moses is out on Mount Sinai working with God, and in the meantime, they create this golden calf and they are worshiping this idol and get in big trouble for that. And then a lot of information on the Passover and all these rules around Passover and how to eat and how to, again, do these, sacrifices and all these rules around this. So it's a lot of that. All right, so let's get into this here in terms of what did Melchizedek have to say about Exodus? All right. Dear ones, Exodus is an amalgamation of many writers' content, different points of view, all melded together to try to make one connected story that serves a few purposes. All right. First of all, Exodus was meant as a way to strike fear into the people, all people, regardless of race or origin or social standing. Yeah, so, the fear of the Egyptian Pharaoh and all those people there, and then fear into the folks of Israel as well. So nobody was excluded from the wrath of God or having the fear of God, really struck into them in a forceful way. Second, it provided a very clear guidebook for how people in a historical context should behave and how justice might be served. Man, there's so much content on this. And they said here, it also provided an example to all peoples of the time what might be required to commune with God and keep God's favor. So already you're kind of seeing like it's very much feeling like a way to manipulate people in terms of what the leadership wanted people to believe and the fear that they wanted people to have in God. You certainly weren't supposed to feel a kinship with God or God within, but this was an angry, jealous God that could strike you down at any moment. So really, Exodus is a lot about that. Okay. And Melchizedek continues here. The tertiary messages in this part of the Bible originated with Melchizedek. These messages were conscientiously minimalized and overtaken by content espousing the primary messages as just outlined. Okay. So Melchizedek didn't write all of Exodus, but they wrote a portion of it. Some of this is still intact, they said. Okay. Melchizedek's intentions with Exodus were to introduce the character Moses, who was actually a real person. Moses was a shepherd of God's will and testimony, providing proof and reasons to believe that, in fact, God and beings of higher states of consciousness could interact and speak with the human channel, and that indeed seeming miracles could be enacted by God via these channels to be witnessed by the people. Okay, this was more of Melchizedek's intention with the content that they provided here. Moses was a real person. Moses is a channel that you can actually channel higher dimensional beings. Back in the day, that would have been very tough to understand. But, Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, folks before Moses had also worked directly with God. The difference here being with Exodus that, this is, kind of coming through Moses, but for the people and for the people of Egypt, for the Israelites, and kind of being witnessed on a mass scale. And they continue here. God said to the people of Israel through Moses, "Take my hand and let me lead you. Let me lead you out of subjugation. Allow me to tend to you. Allow yourselves to be free from tyranny. As previously mentioned, the 12 tribes of Israel, as outlined in Genesis, were meant to help describe the various types of people present on the earth, not only then, but now, to give a broad understanding of the differing levels of consciousness, differing belief systems, all equal but different. They say here, these categories of people represent humanity on earth. So Israel, the Israelites, representing humanity on earth. Its oppressor not being from Egypt, but from nowhere on this planet. A cryptic tongue was necessary, dear ones, so that at least some of the intended messages could survive. Yeah. They say here, the people of Israel, upon seeing Moses descend from the mountain with 2 stone tablets with the commandments scribed on them by God, still questioned the authenticity of God and God's ability to be present at such close and personal levels. Questioning and fear are supreme themes woven into these stories. And then they continue here. The King James Version of the Bible set out to thread together many different stories and books into a more cohesive narrative. Therefore, you'll see that content and context were added most liberally to help influence and manipulate the masses. So this kind of mass manipulation's been going on, well, for a very long time. While a far from perfect text, we do feel it is worthwhile to pause and to reflect on some of the original intentions as understood by Melchizedek. They said here, to explain Exodus in detail will take some time. We humbly ask for your patience as we work through some of the more important concepts here that require a bit of explanation. And then they said here, we would first like to talk about Moses. Moses, as mentioned, was a real person. Moses did have a direct line of communication and actual interaction with beings of higher consciousness, with angels, if you will, with us, Melchizedek. Yeah, it's like today, we've got a lot of channels. We've got a lot of people communing with higher consciousness and galactic beings and ascended masters and the angelic realm, of course. But back then, this would not have been, very common. So this was an important part of the messaging here. And then continue. This was a pre-life agreement with Moses and the oversoul of Moses. And all the many aspects of this oversoul continue to carry the torch of light, even in the present moment. Now, many passages in this book attribute God speaking through Moses as the source of information. Much of that is not true. Many passages attributed to God as being channeled here were written by church deacons and other leaders and scribes who weaved in various points of view and instruction that in fact were not godly at all. And that brings to mind all of the information about the blood sacrifices, and the killing that's happening in Exodus. Okay. And they say here, it's no wonder why this book has continued to be quite an enigma throughout the centuries. The stories, the parables, the lessons can be in stark contrast to each other. We worked with Moses in that incarnation, and we have worked with aspects of this oversoul since that lifetime. This monad, this oversoul, much like Shawna's oversoul, has been a scribe and a servant of the light for a very long time. And this being will no doubt continue to be in service long past the current era. I don't know who Moses is in today's era, but I do want to mention that Paul Selig's newest book, which is Melchizedek Channeled, A World Made New, did drop today. And so I love, love, love listening to Paul channel Melchizedek through Audible. So I love to hear that on Audible. So I would recommend that to you if you want to check that out. So yeah, the latest book just dropped today. So exciting. All right. Melchizedek continues here. We would like to touch on the 10 Commandments. Moses did receive these commandments, these guiding principles from the Order of Melchizedek. I was surprised to hear this, actually. These commandments have morphed and changed over the centuries, but the basic ideals have been left intact. These commandments were a starting point for peoples and generations who were seeking moral guidelines. In more modern times, it's taken for granted that it's not a good idea to steal, it's not a good idea to murder, and honoring your mother and father is a good idea. But there were times in the species' history when these things weren't apparent. We would like to direct you to Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. All right, it's not long. I'm going to read it to you with my really bad lighting. You shall not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. All right, that's actually the second commandment after you shall have no other gods before me or besides me. All right, so that verse 4 there, it's in doing a little bit of research tonight, it's definitely a little bit different than kind of what I'm seeing online. So there's definitely different interpretations of the second commandment, but shall not create idols, false idols, is usually how that is translated and put into lay terms. Okay. Here's what Melchizedek had to say about this. This particular passage has been mistranslated and misconstrued over the centuries. The intention here was to ensure that the people of the time knew and understood that there were many false gods among them and that they could come from anywhere. Also, to create images or idols helps to separate oneself from the divine within, the knowing, the love, the connection to source, the inherent divinity that is your birthright. Those with influence at the time certainly didn't want people to know this about themselves. All right, and that's where they ended the channeling for tonight. All right, so we just really are scratching the surface here with Exodus, talking a little bit about Moses, setting some context there for Moses being an actual person, being actually plugged in and to be a channel and a scribe. For angels, for Melchizedek, we'll see for what else. Yeah, so I definitely have a ton of questions. I think this brings to mind, who is Yahweh? Who is God? Who are, and throughout the Bible, there's all kinds of references, obviously, to God and the Word of God and everyday people like Moses, bringing the Word of God forward. So if Melchizedek is the one who brought forward the commandments, then, who is God in this context? So I know for me, and I've just kind of run out of steam for today, I've got these big questions, and I imagine that you do too. So I'm really hoping we can get to that level of information with them. And I'm sure they'll answer that. So again, this may be bringing up more questions for you than it is answering questions, but we've got to start somewhere. All right. But I think it's really good to know, it's good to understand that Exodus in its entirety really is an amalgamation. It's not all divine information coming from God or from Melchizedek. That, there are a lot of things here that have been massaged into the story, woven into the story here to make sure that everybody's afraid of God, knows God to be, to have wrath and to be, jealous, and all these things that really are not necessarily the case. So I think it gives us a good foundation from which to build. So we'll see where this goes. All right, that's really it from me tonight. Again, thanks for being here. I know there's a lot of questions and stuff swirling out there, and I really appreciate you being here and supporting me and supporting this work and helping seed consciousness with this. And I highly recommend you check out Paul Selig's new book, A World Made New. All right, team, I will see you next week, if not sooner. I love you so much. Mwah.